Boom, boom,
Boys, get a
bow.
mark for them.
Aye.
Picture this. It's 3 a.m. on a quiet residential street in Tunbridge Wells, Kent. 13 masked men in multiple vehicles descend on an ordinary-looking semi-detached house on Caley Road, armed with sledgehammers and blades, ready to tear out a fortune in cannabis plants. They think it's just another quick hit, another payday. But upstairs, behind a fortified steel gate welded to the landing, a 25-year-old Albanian gardener named Xhovan Pepaj is already dialing his bosses, calling for armed backup. Within minutes, 3 of the raiders are locked in a savage standoff with him through the bars. Fists fly, blades stab through the gaps, and then the Albanian reinforcements screech up outside, smashing windows to get in. What unfolds next is absolute carnage, a fatal stabbing recorded live on an accidental 999 call, a panicked scramble through upstairs windows as the hunters become the hunted, and a desperate fight for survival behind that impenetrable gate. Today, we unravel this shocking true story of greed, violence, and a catastrophic miscalculation. A botched robbery that laid bare the brutal reality of the Albanian crime networks still controlling Britain's underground cannabis empire. If you're new here, hit subscribe and become part of our community diving into the UK's darkest true crime cases. Like, share, and turn on notifications so you never miss a pulse. To grasp the lethal confrontation that erupted on Caley Road in Tunbridge Wells, we first need to understand the Albanian organized crime syndicates that have seized control of Britain's illegal cannabis industry. What was once a fragmented trade dominated by various groups has been systematically taken over by these ruthlessly efficient networks. Today, they run the overwhelming majority of large-scale cannabis grows across the UK, converting unremarkable suburban houses into high-security fortresses worth hundreds of thousands of pounds each. According to the National Crime Agency, Albanian criminal organizations have pushed out previous operators, including Vietnamese gangs, by bringing military-grade discipline, armed protection, reinforced security infrastructure like steel gates and doors, and rapid response units ready to defend their assets with extreme violence. Their control is absolute. They manage every link in the chain, from cultivating high-potency strains in purpose-built facilities to street-level distribution across England and Wales. These operations aren't makeshift setups run by amateurs. They're sophisticated criminal enterprises designed to maximize profit and repel any threat, manned by low-level workers like Xhovan Pepaj, who live on site to maintain the crops and serve as the first line of defense. But this dominance has come at a staggering human cost, reflected in chilling statistics that reveal their disproportionate presence in the UK prison system. Official government data shows that roughly 1 in every 36 Albanian men residing in England and Wales is currently incarcerated. By late 2024, nearly 1,100 Albanians were serving sentences in British prisons, convicted of crimes ranging from murder and drug trafficking for the feared Balkan Mafia controlling much of Britain's narcotics trade, to rape and violent assault. Of these, only 3 were women. Yet the most recent census figures place the total Albanian-born male population in the UK at just 39,910, a number swelled in recent years by small boat crossings that have funneled workers directly into these networks. These aren't disorganized street criminals operating alone. They're disciplined, hierarchical clans bound by loyalty, family ties, and the ever-present threat of violence. Defending their territory isn't optional, it's mandatory. Raiding one of their cannabis houses isn't simply theft, it's an act of war against an empire that retaliates swiftly and without mercy. And on December 4th, 2021, that's precisely what an opportunistic Essex crew stumbled into, transforming what they thought would be an easy score into a blood-soaked nightmare. Xhovan Pepaj was no crime boss, no battle-hardened enforcer, no cinematic gangster living large on ill-gotten gains. He was simply 25 years old, an ordinary Albanian man who had traveled to the UK searching for something better than the grinding poverty and bleak prospects he faced back home. Like tens of thousands of his countrymen before him, Pepaj had been drawn by the promise of work, opportunity, and a chance to build a life in Britain.
But for many young Albanian migrants pulled into these networks, that dream quickly twisted into a trap. Pepaj became what the cannabis underworld calls a gardener, one of the invisible, disposable laborers who keep the operation running day and night. His duties were straightforward, but carried immense risk. He watered the plants, monitored the intense grow lights, calibrated the hydroponic systems, and ensured the crop matured to its maximum street value, often worth hundreds of thousands of pounds per harvest. But tending plants was half the job. Pepaj was also the alarm system, the human tripwire. If rival gangs or police showed up, it was his responsibility to spot the threat immediately, grab his mobile, and phone the higher-ups in the organization. Reinforcements would be dispatched within minutes, armed men racing to protect the crop and punish anyone who dared touch it. If Pepaj failed to make that call or failed to hold out long enough for backup to arrive, the consequences would fall entirely on him. Beatings, torture, or worse, delivered not by the police but by his own bosses for losing their investment. The pressure was crushing and constant. Gardeners like Pepaj were expendable assets, paid barely enough to survive, kept isolated and afraid, always aware that a single mistake could mean death. This wasn't Pepaj's first brush with the law. He already had a conviction on his record for involvement in cannabis production, having served time in a UK prison as just another faceless cog in the vast Albanian machine. After his release, he found himself pulled back in, whether by threats, debts he couldn't escape, or simply the absence of any legitimate alternative. On the freezing December night of 2021, Pepaj was doing exactly what was expected of him, sleeping fitfully inside the fortified house on Caley Road, a peaceful street in Tunbridge Wells, where neighbors had no idea what was hidden behind the blacked-out windows. The crop inside represented a small fortune on the streets. For Xhovan Pepaj, it was just another shift in a life that had become defined by fear, isolation, and vigilance. He had no way of knowing that this time, when the front door exploded inward in a storm of splintering wood and shouting voices, his frantic call for help would spark a chain of events that would end in his brutal death. And behind that unbreakable steel gate, he would fight for his life, utterly alone.
Standing in stark contrast to Xhovan Pepaj and the disciplined Albanian operation was a ragtag crew of 13 men from working-class corners of Essex, pulled together by one simple motive: to rob cannabis grows and walk away with fast cash. They hailed from council estates and ordinary streets in towns like Hornchurch, Ilford, and Romford, communities on the eastern fringe of London, where legitimate opportunities can feel scarce and the temptation of easy money runs strong. The crew's makeup was diverse in age, ranging from teenagers barely out of school to hardened criminals in their 50s. The youngest members were just 18 and 19 years old, fueled by youthful recklessness and hungry for quick scores. The oldest, like 52-year-old Glenn Howe, brought decades of street experience to the table. These weren't sophisticated gangsters with rigid command structures or long-term criminal strategies. They were opportunists, local lads and older offenders who had learned through whispers and underworld contacts that Albanian-run cannabis houses were packed with mature plants ready to harvest and convert into tens of thousands of pounds. Their specialty was what criminals call crop raiding or taxing, a high-risk, high-reward game. The plan was always the same: identify a grow house, smash your way in during the early morning hours, strip out as many plants as possible in minutes, and vanish before the owners or police could respond. Then sell the stolen cannabis to street dealers and pocket the profits. The three men who would come face to face with Pepaj that night were among the crew's most aggressive members. Kieran Stewart, just 20 years old, was a natural leader, confident, violent, and quick to take control in chaotic situations. Kelvin Amoko, barely 18, was eager to prove his worth and earn respect through action. Bartosz Malaski, 28, completed the trio that would chase Pepaj up the stairs and trap him behind the steel gate. The remaining 10 members played supporting roles: lookouts scanning the street for witnesses, drivers keeping engines running for a fast escape, and muscle ready to rip plants from their pots and haul them to waiting vehicles. Men like Nathan Rainford, Dante Simpson Palmer, Charles Riley, Mohammed Mir, and others, each assigned a piece of the operation. This wasn't the crew's first rodeo. They had successfully hit other cannabis houses before, refining their tactics with each raid. They knew what to look for: windows covered with blackout material, condensation on the glass from intense heat and humidity, frequent short visits by nervous-looking men, electricity meters bypassed or tampered with. Their strategy relied on overwhelming force rather than finesse. 13 men storming a property at once, armed with hammers and blades, betting that sheer numbers and speed would overcome any resistance before the gardener could summon help. They counted on fear and surprise, not sophisticated planning or inside intelligence. And on the cold December night they rolled up to Caley Road, they believed they were about to pull off another easy job. They had no idea they were about to kick down the door to a fortress, or that within minutes, the hunters would become the hunted. Hello? Emergency. Which service do you require? Silence. Then breathing. Heavy, panicked breathing crackling through the line. Hello? Can you hear me? What's your emergency? The 999 operator in the Kent control room leaned closer to her headset, straining to make sense of the chaotic sounds flooding through the connection. It was 3:17 a.m. on December 4th, 2021, and something was terribly wrong. In the background, muffled shouts echoed, banging, the unmistakable sound of metal striking metal. Then a voice, distant but desperate, screaming words the operator couldn't quite make out. More banging, a struggle, the scrape of something dragging across a hard surface. Hello, can anyone hear me? I need you to tell me what's happening. But no one was listening. No one had meant to make this call at all. Somewhere in Tunbridge Wells, in a house the operator couldn't yet identify, a phone had accidentally dialed emergency services during a violent struggle. And for the next several minutes, as the dispatcher frantically tried to trace the location, she would bear witness to a murder unfolding in real time. Grunts of effort, the sickening thud of blows landing, screams of pain cutting through the darkness. She heard men shouting over each other, their voices sharp with rage and fear. She heard something that sounded like blades slicing through fabric, through flesh. She heard a man dying. The tragic irony wouldn't become clear until days later, when detectives played back that recording in a stunned courtroom. The killers had provided the evidence that would convict them. Every grunt, every threat, every identifiable voice captured in perfect digital clarity. A pocket dial from hell, a call from the grave that would send 3 men to prison for life. The question was, who were these voices, and what had driven them to such savage violence on a quiet residential street in the dead of night? To understand how Xhovan Pepaj ended up bleeding out on a landing in Tunbridge Wells, you first need to understand the invisible army of men just like him, scattered across Britain. Young Albanian nationals, many barely out of their 20s, living like ghosts inside ordinary-looking houses on quiet suburban streets. They're called gardeners in the trade, and they are the foundation upon which the entire Albanian cannabis empire is built.
Xhovan Pepaj was 25 years old when he died. He'd come to the UK like thousands of other Albanian men, chasing the promise of a better life than the one waiting for him back home. Albania remains one of Europe's poorest nations, with youth unemployment crushing entire generations and legitimate opportunities scarce outside the major cities. For young men with limited education and no connections, the journey to Britain represented hope, a chance to send money back to struggling families, to build something real. But for many, that dream evaporated the moment they stepped off the boat or lorry that brought them here illegally. The debts they owed to the smuggling networks were staggering, sometimes tens of thousands of pounds. And the men who controlled those networks had a simple solution: work it off. That's how the gardener system functions. It's modern slavery dressed up as opportunity. These young men are placed inside cannabis grow houses, sometimes willingly, often under threat. Their job is deceptively simple: water the plants, monitor the temperature and humidity, adjust the powerful LED grow lights on precise timers.
Ensure the hydroponic systems pump nutrients to hundreds of plants arranged in tight rows across every room. Trim away dead leaves. Watch for mold or pests. Keep everything running smoothly so that when harvest time comes, the crop yields maximum profit, often hundreds of thousands of pounds per house. But the real job, the one that makes them more than just laborers, is security. A gardener is a human alarm system. He lives alone in the house, day after day, week after week, sometimes for months at a time. The windows are blacked out with paint or thick plastic sheeting, so neighbors can't see in, and natural light can't disrupt the growing cycle. Food is dropped off irregularly, usually at night. There's no television, no internet, minimal contact with the outside world. Just the plants, the hum of ventilation fans, and the suffocating awareness that at any moment, two kinds of people might come crashing through that door: police or rival gangs. If it's the police, the gardener goes to prison. He's expendable, a nobody with no paperwork, no legal status, often no English. He'll serve time, get deported, and be replaced within days. But if it's rivals coming to tax the house, to steal the crop, the gardener has one critical responsibility: grab the phone and call the bosses immediately. Reinforcements will arrive within minutes, armed men ready to defend the investment with extreme violence. If the gardener fails to make that call, if he lets the crop get taken, the punishment from his own side would be far worse than anything the police could do. Beatings, torture, death. Xhovan Pepaj knew this system intimately. He'd already served time in a UK prison for cannabis production, another gardener caught in another house, another disposable cog in the machine. Released, he'd been pulled back in, whether by debt, threats, or the simple absence of any other option. On December 4, 2021, he was doing exactly what was expected of him, sleeping lightly in the fortified house on Caley Road, surrounded by a fortune in cannabis plants, waiting for a threat that could come at any moment. When it finally did, he would grab his phone and make that call. He would hold the gate, he would do everything right, and he would die alone anyway. If Xhovan Pepaj represented the bottom rung of the Albanian cannabis empire, the men who would kill him that December night were something else entirely. Not organized crime in the traditional sense, not a disciplined gang with hierarchy and long-term strategy, just a loose collection of opportunistic criminals from the council estates and working-class streets of Essex, pulled together by greed and the seductive promise of easy money. They came from Hornchurch, Ilford, Romford, towns on the eastern edge of London, where legitimate opportunities can feel scarce and the underground economy thrives. 13 men in total, their ages spanning from teenage bravado to middle-aged desperation. The youngest, Kelvin Amoko, was barely 18, still carrying the reckless confidence of youth, eager to prove himself worthy of respect in a world that measured manhood in violence and cash. Ciaran Stewart, 20, was the natural leader, aggressive and quick-thinking, the kind of young man who could organize chaos into action. Bartosz Malowski, 28, brought a harder edge, more experience with the brutal realities of street crime. Their specialty was what the underworld calls taxing, a particularly dangerous gamble that relies on one simple truth: drug dealers can't call the police. If you rob a cannabis grow house, the victims have no legal recourse. They can't file a report. They can't seek protection from authorities. Their only option is retaliation, which makes taxing a deadly game of speed and timing. Get in fast, strip the house of plants worth tens of thousands of pounds, and get out before reinforcements arrive. The strategy was primitive but effective: overwhelming force, maximum aggression, and the assumption that a lone gardener would either flee or submit rather than fight back. The crew had done this before. They learned to spot the telltale signs of a cannabis grow house: windows completely blacked out with paint or plastic sheeting, condensation on the glass from intense heat and humidity inside, the faint hum of industrial ventilation fans running day and night, Electricity meters bypassed or rigged to hide the massive power consumption needed to run dozens of grow lights. Frequent short visits by nervous men who never stayed long. These weren't difficult houses to identify if you knew what to look for. Word had reached them about the Caley Road property in Tunbridge Wells, a big operation, mature plants ready for harvest, potentially worth $500,000 on the street. The planning, as it was, consisted of gathering enough men to overwhelm any resistance, arming themselves with sledgehammers to breach doors and knives to intimidate or worse, and scheduling the raid for the dead hours of early morning when a gardener would be asleep and backup would take precious minutes to arrive. What they didn't plan for, what they couldn't have anticipated, was the steel gate welded across the upstairs landing, or the fact that this particular gardener wouldn't run, or that the Albanian reinforcements would arrive faster than they'd ever imagined possible. On December 4, 2021, Siren Stewart, Kelvin Amoko, and Bartosz Malowski would learn the hard way that some houses aren't meant to be taxed, some fortresses hold, and some gardeners, even knowing they're disposable, will fight to the death rather than face the consequences of failure.
From the outside, the house on Caley Road looked like any other semi-detached property on a quiet residential street in Tunbridge Wells. Modest brick facade, small front garden, the kind of unremarkable suburban home where young families raise children and retirees tend their roses. Neighbors passed it every day without a second thought. Dog walkers, commuters heading to the train station, kids on their way to school. None of them realized they were walking past a fortress worth £500,000. But if you knew what to look for, the signs were there. Every window on the property was covered from the inside, not with curtains or blinds, but with thick black plastic sheeting and paint that blocked out every trace of natural light. Even in broad daylight, you couldn't see in. The curtains never opened. No one ever looked out. In winter, condensation would sometimes fog the glass from the intense heat and humidity trapped inside, a telltale signature of industrial-scale cannabis cultivation. The house had been systematically converted into a growing facility with the kind of professional precision that separated Albanian operations from amateur setups. The electricity meter had been bypassed, illegally rigged to siphon power directly from the grid without registering consumption. This was essential because a grow operation of this scale, with dozens of high-powered LED lights running 16 hours a day, would generate electricity bills in the thousands of pounds per month, an instant red flag to authorities. Industrial ventilation systems had been installed to manage the suffocating heat produced by the lights and to circulate air through the dense canopy of plants packed into every available room. But the most critical modification, the one that would turn a routine robbery into a murder scene, was the reinforced steel gate welded across the staircase landing. This wasn't a flimsy security measure. It was a solid barrier of thick metal bars running from floor to ceiling, fitted with a heavy-duty lock that could only be opened from the inside. The gate effectively divided the house into two zones: downstairs, where the bulk of the cannabis crop was cultivated in tight rows under blazing lights, and upstairs, where the gardener slept and stored minimal personal belongings. If raiders breached the front door, the gardener's job was simple: retreat upstairs, lock the gate, and call for backup. The gate would buy him time, precious minutes for reinforcements to arrive, while the raiders struggled futilely to break through steel bars designed to withstand sledgehammers and brute force. For Xhovan Pepaj, that gate represented survival. It was his insurance policy, the one piece of engineering that stood between him and violent death if rivals came calling. He drilled the routine in his head countless times: hear the door break, grab the phone, run upstairs, lock the gate, make the call, hold the position. Just hold out for a few minutes. Help would come. The bosses would send men. He just had to survive long enough. On December 4th, 2021, at 3 a.m., when 13 men rolled up to Caley Road in multiple vehicles and smashed through the front door with sledgehammers, Xhovan Pepaj did everything right. He ran, he locked the gate, he made the call, but this time, the gate that was meant to save his life would become the cage where he died. At 3 a.m. on December 4th, 2021, Caley Road was dead silent. Streetlights cast pale orange pools across empty pavements. Curtains were drawn in every house. The entire neighborhood was asleep, unaware of the violence about to erupt in their midst. Then the convoy arrived. Multiple vehicles rolled slowly down the street, headlights off, engines purring low. They parked in a loose formation near the target house, doors opening almost simultaneously as 13 masked figures emerged into the freezing December air. Some carried sledgehammers, others gripped knives and crowbars. Their faces were covered with balaclavas and bandanas, their movements quick and purposeful. This wasn't their first raid, and it showed in the efficiency of their approach. The strategy was simple and brutal. Overwhelming force. 13 men swarming a single property in the middle of the night, hitting so hard and fast that the lone gardener inside wouldn't have time to think, let alone organize resistance. Speed was everything. Get in, grab as many plants as possible, and vanish before police or Albanian backup could respond. In theory, they'd be in and out in under 10 minutes, loading mature cannabis plants worth hundreds of thousands of pounds into waiting vehicles and disappearing into the night. Ciaran Stewart led the charge toward the front door, sledgehammer raised. Behind him, Kelvin Amwako and Bartosz Malowski moved with predatory intent, blades ready. The rest of the crew fanned out, some watching the street for witnesses or approaching vehicles, others preparing to haul the crop. Inside the house, Xhovan Pepaj awoke to the sound of the front door exploding inward. His nightmare had begun.
The front door shattered under the first blow of the sledgehammer, wood splintering as masked men poured into the house like a flood. Xhovan Pepaj didn't hesitate. He'd been drilled for this exact moment. He grabbed his phone and ran. His bare feet pounded up the stairs as shouts erupted behind him. He could hear them spreading through the ground floor, ripping plants from their pots, the crash of equipment being knocked over. But 3 of them were coming for him. Stewart, Amwako, and Malowski, blades in hand, charging up the stairs. Pepaj reached the landing and slammed the steel gate shut, the lock clicking into place just as the first raider hit the bars. They were trapped on opposite sides of an impenetrable barrier, faces inches apart, breathing hard. Stewart grabbed the bars and shook them violently, but the gate didn't budge. Downstairs, the rest of the crew worked frantically, stuffing plants into bags and hauling them toward the vehicles. Pepaj's hands trembled as he dialed. The phone rang, once, twice, then a voice answered in Albanian. Pepaj spoke rapidly, panic straining his words. The message was clear. They were being raided. He needed help now. Send everyone. The voice on the other end was calm, assured. Reinforcements were already moving. Just hold the gate. Help was minutes away. But minutes can feel like hours when 3 men are on the other side of the bars, screaming threats, reaching through the gaps, trying to grab you, trying to hurt you, trying to find any weakness they can exploit. The standoff on the landing dissolved into chaos. Stewart, realizing the gate wouldn't break, reached through the bars in desperation, grabbing at Pepaj's clothing, trying to pull him closer. Pepaj fought back, struggling to keep distance between himself and the reaching hands, the flashing blades. In the violent scuffle, Stewart's hand closed around Pepaj's phone. He yanked it through the bars. The screen lit up in Stewart's palm, and in his frantic attempt to do something, anything, his finger swiped across the emergency call function. The phone dialed 999. Somewhere in a Kent emergency control room, an operator answered. The connection opened, and every sound that followed was recorded. Hello? Emergency?
Which service do you require? No one answered her. No one even knew the call was happening. The phone lay in Stewart's hand as he shouted to Amawako, frustration and rage boiling over. They couldn't breach the gate. They couldn't get to Pepaj. Time was running out, and outside, car doors were slamming. The Albanian backup had arrived. Amawako lost control. He thrust his blade through the bars again and again, stabbing at Pepaj through the narrow gaps. The operator listened in horror as screams echoed through the line, as metal scraped against metal, as a man died inches away from his killers, but forever out of their reach. The fatal wounds were delivered through steel bars. The evidence was captured on a call they never meant to make, and outside, the reinforcements were smashing through the downstairs windows. The dynamic shifted in an instant. The hunters became the hunted. Outside, multiple vehicles screeched to a halt on Caley Road. Car doors flew open, and Albanian reinforcements spilled out, armed and moving with lethal purpose. They'd received Pepaj's call minutes earlier and raced across Tunbridge Wells at breakneck speed. Now they were here, and they had one objective: protect the crop and punish anyone who dared to touch it. The sound of shattering glass exploded through the ground floor as the Albanians smashed windows to force entry. They weren't being subtle. They weren't concerned about witnesses or police. This was about sending a message written in blood and broken bones. Inside the house, panic seized the Essex crew. The men who'd been confidently ripping plants from their pots seconds earlier now abandoned everything, dropping bags of cannabis, scrambling for exits. Downstairs was a death trap. The Albanians were pouring through the windows, and anyone caught would face execution on the spot. Upstairs, Stewart, Amawako, and Malowski heard the chaos below and understood immediately. They were trapped on the wrong side of a war they couldn't win. Pepaj lay dying behind the gate, but there was no time to finish what they'd started. Survival meant escape, now. They turned to the only exit available, the upstairs window. Stewart smashed it open with his elbow, glass cascading down. One by one, they squeezed through, sliding down the sloped porch roof and dropping into the darkness. They hit the ground running, leaving their dying victim, the stolen plants, and the accidental 999 call behind.
When police arrived at Caley Road in response to the 999 call, they found Xhovan Pepaj's body behind the steel gate, surrounded by pools of blood. He'd been stabbed multiple times through the bars, dying alone while waiting for help that arrived too late to save him. But clutched in the crime scene was the key to solving his murder, the mobile phone that had accidentally dialed emergency services. Forensic audio specialists worked meticulously through the recording, isolating voices, identifying distinct speech patterns and accents. They could hear Stewart shouting commands. They could hear Amawako's rage as he thrust the blade through the bars. Every grunt, every threat, every identifiable sound became evidence. The investigation moved quickly. Within days, police had matched the voices on the 999 call to known criminals. Raids across Essex netted arrests. Some of the crew members still had cannabis residue on their clothing and in their vehicles. Others cracked under interrogation, providing statements that corroborated the audio evidence. At trial, the prosecution played the recording for the jury. The courtroom sat in stunned silence as they listened to a murder unfold in real time, captured by the killer's own catastrophic mistake. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Kelvin Amawako, Siren Stewart, and Bartosz Malowski were convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Justice had been served, delivered by the very phone they'd grabbed in desperation. Within a week of Pepaj's death, the house on Caley Road was cleared and cleaned. The Albanian network didn't pause. Another gardener was installed. Another crop was planted. The machine continued, indifferent to the blood spilled on its behalf.